Have you ever been underestimated by someone who claimed to love you? Well, I'm about to tell you a story that will make your jaw drop. My name is Rachel, and for 29 years, I was married to a man who thought I was nothing more than a pretty face. He saw me as his trophy wife while he climbed the corporate ladder. But what he didn't know was that I was building an empire right under his nose. If you love revenge stories like this one, smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible revenge stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. My story begins in the small town of Maplewood Heights, where I met James Mitchell at a coffee shop when I was just 20 years old. He was this confident business student who swept me off my feet with his big dreams and charming smile. Back then, I was working part-time at a local bookstore while studying art. James would always tell me how beautiful I was and how lucky he felt to have me by his side. We got married 2 years later in a simple ceremony. James had just gotten his first job at a marketing firm, and I was so proud of him. He would come home every day talking about his work, his bosses, and his plans to climb to the top. I listened to every word, supporting him through late nights and weekend work sessions. But as the years went by, something changed. James started making little comments about how I should focus on looking good for his company events instead of pursuing my own interests. When I mentioned wanting to start a small business, he would laugh and say things like, "Leave the business stuff to me, honey. You just worry about keeping the house nice." At first, I thought he was just being protective, but then the comments got worse. He would tell his friends that I was just a housewife and that I wouldn't understand business conversations. During dinner parties, he would dismiss my opinions and change the subject whenever I tried to contribute to discussions about work or money. The breaking point came during our 15th wedding anniversary dinner. I had been secretly working on a small online jewelry business for about a year, making custom pieces in our spare bedroom. I was so excited because I had just gotten my first big order worth $5,000 from a local boutique. I thought James would be proud of me. When I told him about my success, he looked at me with this condescending smile and said, "That's cute, Rachel. It's like a little hobby for you. But don't worry about trying to make real money. That's what I'm here for." I felt my heart sink. Here I was, trying to build something of my own, and he treated it like a child's game. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to show James exactly what this trophy wife was capable of. I started waking up at 5 a.m. every morning, working on my business before James got up. I used our basement as my workshop, telling him I was just organizing things down there. I reinvested every dollar I made back into the business, buying better equipment and materials. My jewelry business began to grow faster than I had ever imagined. I created an online store and started selling to customers all over the country. Within 6 months, I was making more money than James brought home from his marketing job. But I kept everything secret, opening a separate bank account that he knew nothing about. James continued to treat me like I was just there for decoration. He would introduce me to his colleagues as my beautiful wife and never mention that I had any interests or skills of my own. When his friends came over, he would send me to the kitchen to let the men talk business. But while they were talking about their small deals and office politics, I was quietly building something much bigger. My jewelry business had caught the attention of several major department stores, and I was negotiating contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The irony was delicious. James would come home complaining about his difficult boss or a lost client, while I was upstairs in our bedroom, taking calls from buyers who wanted to feature my designs in their stores across the nation. 2 years into building my secret empire, I had saved over $500,000, and my business was generating $100,000 in revenue every month. James had no idea that the woman he dismissed as just a pretty face was actually more successful than he had ever been. But James's attitude toward me was getting worse. He started telling me that I was getting too comfortable and that I needed to remember my place. He would criticize everything I did, from how I dressed to how I spoke to his friends. Then came the day that changed everything forever. I was in the basement working on a custom engagement ring order when I heard James on the phone upstairs. He was talking to someone about me, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "Yeah, Rachel's great to look at, but she's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed," he was saying with a laugh. "I mean, she tries to do these little craft projects, but it's nothing serious. I keep her around because she makes me look good at company events. A man needs a beautiful wife to show he's successful, you know." I stood there in shock, holding a diamond ring worth $15,000 that I had just finished crafting. This man who claimed to love me was talking about me like I was some kind of object he owned. But that wasn't even the worst part. What he said next made me realize that my marriage was about to come to a dramatic end. "Actually, I've been thinking about upgrading," James continued on the phone, and I could hear him walking around our living room. "There's this new girl at work, Amanda. She's 26, blonde, and she actually understands business. Plus, she thinks I'm amazing. Rachel's getting older, and honestly, I'm getting bored. I might just divorce her and start fresh with someone who can actually help my career." My hands were shaking as I held that expensive ring. 27 years of marriage, and he was talking about replacing me like I was an old car. I quietly crept up the basement stairs to hear more. "The best part is Rachel won't get much in the divorce," James laughed. "She never worked a real job, so she can't claim she contributed to our wealth. She'll probably have to move back in with her sister and find some minimum wage job. Maybe then she'll realize how good she had it with me." I had heard enough. I slowly walked back down to my workshop, sat down at my jewelry bench, and did something I had never done before. I called my lawyer. "Hi, this is Rachel Mitchell. I need to schedule an appointment to discuss divorce proceedings," I said quietly into my phone. The lawyer, Mrs. Patterson, was a woman I had met at one of my business networking events. Yes, while James thought I was just shopping and getting my nails done, I was actually attending business conferences and building professional relationships. "I'll need documentation of all assets and income," Mrs. Patterson explained during our meeting the next week. "Do you have records of your husband's salary and investments?" I smiled and pulled out a thick folder. "I have all of James's financial information, but I also have something else you might find interesting." I handed her a second folder, much thicker than the first. "These are records of my business income for the past 3 years. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened as she flipped through bank statements showing deposits of $50,000. $80,000, and even $120,000 in single months. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you telling me you've built a business generating over $1 million annually?" "Actually, it's closer to $1.5 million this year," I replied calmly. "And my husband has no idea it exists." The lawyer leaned back in her chair with a huge grin. "This is going to be very interesting." While James was busy planning his future with Amanda from work, I was busy securing mine. I moved most of my business assets into a separate company structure that Mrs. Patterson helped me create. Everything was completely legal since the money was earned during our marriage. But James had never bothered to pay attention to what I was doing. At home, I continued to act like the same simple housewife James thought I was. I cooked his dinner, smiled when he talked about work, and pretended I didn't know about his plans to leave me for a younger woman. But inside, I was planning something that would teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. James started staying out late, claiming he was working on important projects. I knew he was probably with Amanda, but I didn't confront him. Instead, I used his absence to finalize my divorce strategy. 3 months after overhearing that phone call, James came home with a serious look on his face. He sat me down at our kitchen table and took my hands in his. "Rachel, we need to talk," he said with fake concern in his voice. "I think we've grown apart over the years. Maybe it's time we considered going our separate ways." I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "You want a divorce?" "It's not what I want, honey, but sometimes these things happen," he said, patting my hand like I was a child. Don't worry, though. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Maybe you can get a job at that bookstore again, or I could help you find something simple. I nodded slowly, letting a single tear roll down my cheek. If that's what you think is best, James. He seemed relieved that I wasn't fighting him. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We can keep this simple and friendly. I'll give you enough money to rent a small apartment and get back on your feet. How much is enough? I asked quietly. Well, I was thinking maybe $50,000 to start fresh. That should last you a while if you're careful with it. $50,000. After 27 years of marriage and thinking I had contributed nothing to our relationship, he was offering me $50,000. I almost laughed out loud, but I managed to keep my composure. That sounds fair, I whispered, knowing that I had earned more than that in just the past month alone. James looked surprised at how easily I had agreed. Really? You're not going to fight me on this? I just want you to be happy, James. If this Amanda makes you happier than I do, then maybe this is for the best. His face went pale. How did you? I never mentioned anyone named Amanda. I realized I had made a mistake, but I quickly covered it up. You talk in your sleep, sometimes. I heard you mention that name a few times. He seemed to accept this explanation, though he looked a bit uncomfortable. Well, anyway, I'm glad we can handle this like adults. My lawyer will have the papers ready next week. As James walked upstairs, probably to call Amanda and tell her the good news, I sat in our kitchen and smiled. He had no idea that the woman he was divorcing owned a business worth over $3 million, had contracts with major retailers across the country, and had been featured in national jewelry magazines. But the best part was still coming. In 1 week, James would learn exactly what kind of mistake he had made, and I was going to make sure he never forgot it. The next morning, James woke up humming and seemed happier than he had been in years. He even made me breakfast, which he hadn't done since our first year of marriage. You know what, Rachel? I think this divorce is going to be good for both of us, he said, flipping pancakes with a big smile. You'll finally have a chance to find yourself, and I can focus on my career without any distractions. I nodded and smiled sweetly. You're absolutely right, James. I can't wait to see what the future holds. But as I sat there eating breakfast with my soon-to-be ex-husband, my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. It was from the CEO of Luxury Designs International, one of the biggest jewelry companies in the world. The message read, Rachel, we've been following your work for months. We'd like to offer you an exclusive partnership worth $10 million over 3 years. Can we schedule a meeting this week? I casually put my phone away, but inside I was celebrating. James thought he was leaving me with nothing, but I was about to become richer than he could ever imagine. However, what happened next would shock both of us in ways neither of us could have predicted. That afternoon, while James was at work probably celebrating his upcoming freedom with Amanda, I received an unexpected visitor. I was in my basement workshop putting the finishing touches on a custom necklace when I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door to find a woman in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. She was tall, elegant, and looked like she meant business. Mrs. Rachel Mitchell, she asked with a professional smile. Yes, that's me, I replied, wondering who this could be. My name is Victoria Kane. I'm a private investigator, and I've been hired to look into your husband's activities. She paused and looked around. May I come in? I think you'll want to hear what I've discovered. My heart started racing. I led her into our living room, wondering what James had gotten himself into. Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder filled with photographs and documents. Mrs. Mitchell, I was hired by the wife of Amanda Chin, the woman your husband has been seeing. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Amanda was married? This whole situation was even messier than I thought. Amanda's husband, David, suspected she was having an affair and hired me to investigate, Victoria continued. What I found was very interesting. Your husband and Amanda have been planning more than just a simple affair. She spread several photographs across our coffee table. They showed James and Amanda at restaurants, hotels, and even at what looked like a real estate office. They've been looking at houses together, Victoria explained. But here's the interesting part. According to their conversations that I recorded, they're planning to use your divorce settlement to start a new life together. I stared at the photos in disbelief. What do you mean? Victoria pulled out a small recording device. I have them on tape discussing how James plans to keep most of the marital assets by claiming you never contributed financially to the marriage. They're planning to buy a house in California and start a consulting business together using the money from your divorce. She pressed play, and I heard James's voice clearly. Rachel's so naive, she'll probably sign whatever papers I put in front of her. She has no idea how much money we actually have saved up. I've been hiding assets for months, moving money into accounts she doesn't know about. Then I heard Amanda's voice. Poor thing probably thinks she'll get alimony. Little does she know, you've been documenting how she doesn't work for years. The judge will see she's capable of supporting herself. I felt sick to my stomach. Not only was James cheating on me, but he was also stealing from me. Victoria turned off the recording and looked at me with sympathy. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm really sorry you had to hear that, but I thought you should know what you're dealing with before you sign any divorce papers. I took a deep breath and looked at this private investigator who had just handed me the most valuable information of my life. Victoria, can I ask you something? Of course. How much would it cost to hire you to investigate my husband's hidden assets? Victoria smiled. For a case like this, where a cheating husband is trying to steal from his wife, I'd be happy to work with your lawyer to make sure you get everything you're entitled to. After Victoria left, I sat in my living room staring at those photographs and documents. James thought he was so clever, planning to cheat me out of my fair share of our marriage while running off with another man's wife. But James had made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was the same helpless woman he married 27 years ago. He had no idea that while he was plotting against me, I had built something far more valuable than anything he could steal. I called Mrs. Patterson immediately. I need to change our strategy, I told my lawyer. I have evidence that my husband has been hiding assets and planning to defraud me in our divorce. Mrs. Patterson listened as I explained about Victoria's investigation and the recordings. This changes everything, Rachel. With this evidence, we can not only protect your business assets, but also go after him for attempted fraud. There's something else, I said. I want to hire Victoria to do a complete investigation of all of James's finances. I want to know about every hidden account, every secret investment, and every dollar he's tried to hide from me. Over the next few days, Victoria worked with Mrs. Patterson to uncover James's financial deception. What they found was shocking. James had been moving money out of our joint accounts for over a year, hiding almost $200,000 in secret accounts. He had also taken out loans against our house without telling me and had been planning to claim I wasn't entitled to half of our home's value because I didn't contribute to the mortgage payments. But while James was busy being a criminal, I was busy being successful. That week, I signed the $10 million partnership deal with Luxury Designs International. I also received orders from 3 major department store chains, totaling another $2 million. James had no idea that while he was stealing $200,000 from me, I was earning millions. The day finally arrived for us to meet with our lawyers to discuss the divorce terms. James walked into the conference room, looking confident and relaxed. He even winked at me as he sat down across the table. I hope we can keep this simple and friendly, James said to both lawyers. Rachel and I have agreed that she'll take a small settlement and we'll both move on with our lives. Mrs. Patterson smiled politely. Actually, Mr. Mitchell, we need to discuss some discrepancies we've found in your financial disclosures. James looked confused. What kind of discrepancies? Mrs. Patterson opened her briefcase and pulled out bank statements, photographs, and recordings. Well, for starters, we have evidence that you've been hiding assets and planning to defraud your wife. James's face went completely white as Mrs. Patterson played the recording of him and Amanda discussing their plan to cheat me out of my fair share. This is illegal. James stammered. You can't record people without their permission. Actually, Mr. Mitchell, Victoria said as she entered the room, the recordings were made in public places where there's no expectation of privacy. Everything we've gathered is completely legal and admissible in court. James looked like he was about to pass out. Who are you? I'm the private investigator hired to uncover your hidden assets and document your affair with Amanda Chin. This is ridiculous, James shouted, standing up from his chair. Rachel doesn't know anything about finances. She's just a housewife who makes little crafts. She can't afford investigators and lawyers. Mrs. Patterson and I exchanged a look. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Actually, James, I said calmly, there's something I need to tell you about those little crafts of mine. But before I could continue, James's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and his face went even paler. It's Amanda, he whispered. She says it's an emergency. What James heard on that phone call would turn his world completely upside down. James answered the phone with shaking hands. Amanda? What's wrong? We could all hear Amanda's panicked voice through the phone speaker. James, you need to get down here right now. David found out about us, and he's filed for divorce. But that's not the worst part. What do you mean? James asked, his voice cracking. He's taking everything. The house, the cars, even my business. His lawyer says because I was cheating, I don't get anything. And James, he knows about our plans. He knows about the house we were looking at and the money you promised me. James looked around the room at all of us, staring at him. Amanda, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of my own divorce meeting. That's just it. Amanda cried. David's lawyer called your wife's lawyer. They're working together now. James, I think we're in serious trouble. The phone went dead, and James slowly set it down on the table. He looked at Mrs. Patterson with fear in his eyes. Is it true? Are you working with Amanda's husband's lawyer? Mrs. Patterson nodded. Mr. Chen's attorney contacted us when they discovered you and Amanda were planning to use stolen marital assets to start a new life together. We've been sharing information to make sure both wronged spouses get justice. James slumped back into his chair, looking defeated. This is all just a misunderstanding. I wasn't stealing anything. Rachel and I agreed to a simple divorce. Simple, I said, finally speaking up. James, you've been lying to me for months. You've been hiding money, planning to cheat me out of everything I deserve, and running around with another man's wife. But Rachel, you have to understand, James said desperately. I was going to take care of you. I was going to give you $50,000 to start over. That's more than generous for someone who never worked. Victoria pulled out more photographs and placed them in front of James. Mr. Mitchell, we have evidence of you moving $200,000 into secret accounts. We have recordings of you planning to lie to the court about your wife's contributions to the marriage. And we have documentation of you and Amanda looking at houses worth $800,000 that you planned to buy with your wife's money. James's lawyer, who had been quiet this whole time, leaned over and whispered something in his ear. James's face went from white to green. My client would like to take a break to discuss our options, the lawyer said nervously. Of course, Mrs. Patterson replied. But before you go, there's something else we need to address. She pulled out a document I had never seen before. Mr. Mitchell, we've discovered that you forged your wife's signature on several financial documents, including a loan application for $150,000 against your house. James stood up so fast his chair fell over. That's impossible. I never forged anything. Victoria pulled out copies of documents with my signature on them. These are loan papers, insurance changes, and investment withdrawals. The signature analysis shows they were all forged within the past 6 months. I stared at the papers in shock. James, you've been forging my signature? What did you need all this money for? James was sweating and breathing heavily. I needed capital for some investments. I was going to pay it all back after the divorce when I got my share of everything. Your share? I asked, standing up from my chair. James, you've been stealing from me, lying to me and cheating on me, and you still think you deserve half of everything. Rachel, you don't understand business, James said desperately. I built our life. I worked for 27 years to give you a comfortable home. All you did was play around with jewelry in the basement. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I looked at Mrs. Patterson and nodded. James, I said calmly, I think it's time you learn the truth about those little crafts I make in the basement. Mrs. Patterson opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of contracts, bank statements, and business documents. She spread them across the table like a royal flush in poker. Mr. Mitchell, your wife owns Mitchell Luxury Designs, a jewelry company that has generated over $4 million in revenue over the past 3 years. James laughed. That's ridiculous. Rachel doesn't know anything about running a business. Mrs. Patterson continued. She has exclusive contracts with Nordstrom, Macy's, and Bloomingdale's. She recently signed a $10 million partnership deal with Luxury Designs International. Her business is currently valued at over $8 million. James stopped laughing. What? I reached into my purse and pulled out a business magazine. On the cover was a photo of me wearing one of my own necklaces with the headline, Female Entrepreneur of the Year, Rachel Mitchell's Rise to Jewelry Empire. This came out last month, I said, sliding the magazine across the table. While you were busy calling me stupid and planning to leave me with nothing, I was being featured in national business magazines. James picked up the magazine with trembling hands. He stared at the cover photo of me, looking confident and successful in a way he had never seen before. This can't be real, he whispered. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed him my company's website. Mitchell Luxury Designs has over 100,000 followers on social media. Your wife has been featured on Good Morning America, interviewed by Forbes magazine, and invited to speak at business conferences across the country. James looked at me like he was seeing a complete stranger. Rachel, how is this possible? It's possible because while you were busy treating me like I was stupid, I was building something incredible, I replied. Every morning when you thought I was sleeping in, I was working. Every afternoon when you thought I was shopping, I was in business meetings. Every evening when you thought I was watching TV, I was designing jewelry that people all over the world wanted to buy. James's lawyer whispered something else in his ear, and James's face somehow got even paler. So let me get this straight, James said slowly. You've been running a multi-million-dollar business this whole time, and you never told me. Why would I tell you? I asked. So you could take credit for my success the same way you've been taking credit for everything else in our marriage. Mrs. Patterson pulled out one final document. Mr. Mitchell, given the evidence of hidden assets, forged signatures, and attempted fraud, we're prepared to file criminal charges unless you agree to our settlement terms. James looked at the document and his face went completely white. Criminal charges? Forgery, fraud, and theft are all felonies, Mrs. Patterson explained. You could be looking at several years in prison. James turned to his lawyer, desperately. Can they really do this? His lawyer nodded grimly. I'm afraid so. The evidence is overwhelming. That's when James did something that nobody in that room expected. He started to cry, but these weren't tears of remorse or sadness. These were tears of pure rage and humiliation. And what he said next would prove that he hadn't learned anything from this experience. You think you're so smart, don't you, Rachel? James said through his tears. You think you've won? Well, I'll make sure you never see a penny of my money. I'll fight this until we're both broke. I'll make your life so miserable that you'll wish you had just taken the $50,000 and disappeared." The room went completely silent. Even his own lawyer looked horrified. But I just smiled, because James had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he was about to find out exactly how much power a woman with $8 million and a team of excellent lawyers could wield. What happened next would be the final chapter in James's downfall, and it would be more devastating than anything he could have imagined. James wiped his eyes and stood up, pointing his finger at me across the conference table. "You know what, Rachel? I don't care about any of this. You can keep your little jewelry business, but I'm not giving you $1 of my money, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of sneaky, lying woman you really are." Mrs. Patterson and Victoria exchanged glances. James had just made this so much easier for us. "Mr. Mitchell," Mrs. Patterson said calmly, "I don't think you understand the situation you're in. Your wife's business earnings during your marriage make her the primary breadwinner in this relationship. Under state law, you're actually entitled to ask for alimony from her, not the other way around." James's mouth fell open. "What?" "Furthermore," Mrs. Patterson continued, "since you've been hiding assets and committing fraud, you've forfeited your right to an equal share of the marital property. Your wife could actually walk away with everything, including the house you've been taking loans against." I watched as this information slowly sank into James's brain. The man who thought he was leaving me with nothing was about to discover that he might end up with nothing himself. "But here's what's really interesting," I said, pulling out my phone. "While you were busy planning your future with Amanda, I was planning something too." I showed him a news article on my phone from that morning. The headline read, "Local Marketing Executive Under Investigation for Embezzlement and Fraud." James's face went white as he read his own name in the article. How did this get in the news?" Victoria smiled. "Funny thing about fraud investigations, Mr. Mitchell. When they involve forged documents and stolen money, they become public record. And when a private investigator has to report suspected criminal activity to the authorities, well, sometimes reporters get interested in the story." "You called the police?" James whispered. "I had to," Victoria replied. "When I discovered you had forged your wife's signature on legal documents and stolen money from joint accounts, I was legally required to report it." Mrs. Patterson pulled out another document. "James, your employer has been notified about the investigation. Apparently, they're very concerned about having someone under investigation for fraud handling their client accounts." James grabbed the document and read it quickly. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. "They suspended me? They can't do this. I've worked there for 15 years. "Actually, they can," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Most employment contracts have morality clauses that allow companies to suspend employees who are under criminal investigation." I almost felt sorry for James as I watched his whole world crumble around him. Almost. "But wait, it gets better," I said, pulling up another article on my phone. "Remember Amanda? Well, her husband David isn't just divorcing her. He's also suing her for fraud because she used their joint credit cards to pay for hotels and dinners with you." James sank back into his chair. "This is all your fault, Rachel. If you had just been honest about your business from the beginning, none of this would have happened." I stared at him in disbelief. "My fault? James, you've been lying to me, stealing from me and cheating on me. You planned to leave me homeless while you ran off with another man's wife using money you stole from our marriage. And somehow this is my fault. You should have told me about the business." James shouted, "I'm your husband. We're supposed to be partners." "Partners?" I laughed. "James, you spent 27 years telling me I was too stupid to understand business. You dismissed every idea I had and treated me like I was your employee instead of your wife. Why would I tell you about my success when you made it clear you thought I was incapable of success? Victoria pulled out one more recording device. Actually, Mr. Mitchell, would you like to hear what you said about your wife just last week? She pressed play, and James's voice filled the room. Rachel's just arm candy. I keep her around because she makes me look successful, but she's not smart enough to have real conversations about important things. When I leave her for Amanda, I'll finally have a woman who can match my intellect. The room was completely silent except for the sound of James's recorded voice insulting me. When the recording ended, even James's lawyer looked disgusted. I think we should move to final settlement terms, Mrs. Patterson said. Rachel is prepared to be generous, despite everything you've put her through. She slid a document across the table to James. Here's what we're offering. You'll receive $25,000 and your car. Rachel will keep the house, her business, and all other marital assets. In exchange, she won't press criminal charges for the forged signatures and stolen money. James looked at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. $25,000? That's it. That's more than you offered me, I pointed out. And considering you've committed multiple felonies during our marriage, it's extremely generous. James's lawyer leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear for several minutes. Finally, James looked up with defeat in his eyes. What if I don't sign this? Mrs. Patterson smiled. Then Rachel presses criminal charges. You go to prison for fraud and forgery, and you get nothing except a criminal record. Oh, and she still keeps everything because you forfeited your rights when you committed crimes against her. James stared at the settlement papers for a long time. I could see him trying to figure out if there was any way to turn this situation around. But there wasn't. He had underestimated me so completely that he walked right into his own trap. Finally, James picked up the pen. His hand was shaking as he signed his name to the divorce papers that would end our 27-year marriage. As he signed, James started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the bitter, broken laugh of a man who had just realized he threw away the best thing in his life for absolutely nothing. You know what's funny, Rachel? James said as he finished signing. I thought I was so smart. I thought you were just a pretty face with no ambition. I had no idea I was married to a millionaire. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I could have been proud of you. I could have supported your business and been part of your success. Instead, I threw it all away because I was too stupid and arrogant to see what I had. For the first time since this whole process started, James seemed to understand what he had really lost. Not just a wife, but a partner who had built an empire while he was playing petty games. But it was too late for regrets. James had made his choice when he decided to treat me like I was worthless. Now he would have to live with the consequences. As we left the lawyer's office, James's phone rang one more time. It was Amanda, probably calling to tell him about some new disaster in her own divorce proceedings. But James didn't answer. He just stood on the sidewalk outside the law office, holding divorce papers that left him nearly broke, watching me walk away to my car. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't really about revenge anymore. It was about justice. James had spent years making me feel small and worthless. He had tried to steal from me and abandon me. But in the end, his own greed and cruelty had been his downfall. As I drove away from that courthouse as a newly single woman worth over $8 million, I thought about all the women out there who are being told they're not smart enough, strong enough, or capable enough to build something amazing. To those women, I want you to remember my story. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not capable of greatness. Build your dreams quietly if you have to, but never stop building them. And to anyone who thinks they can treat their partner like they're worthless, remember James. Remember that the person you're underestimating today might just be the person who changes your whole world tomorrow. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. It was from my friend Maria, who had decided to marry her longtime boyfriend after seeing how my divorce turned out. The note inside said, "Thank you for showing me that I deserve someone who celebrates my dreams instead of crushing them. Your story gave me the courage to demand better." That note meant more to me than any business contract or magazine feature ever could. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding despite someone's cruelty. Sometimes the best revenge is inspiring others to demand the respect and love they deserve. And as for James, well, let's just say that Amanda decided she didn't want to date an unemployed man with no money and a criminal investigation hanging over his head. Some lessons are more expensive than others, but that's a story for another day.